it was in 1963. The NAACP in Macon wanted to use the city parks. On March 31st, I think some young black people came to Beaconsfield in the evening hours. There was a caretaker down there, and Walter Davis, who was president of the NAACP, said he received a call that the caretaker was waving a gun at the young people.
So this stone was at the entrance of Beaconsfield Park. And it is very significant because it very explicitly spells out the sentiment of Augustus Octavius Bacon, who was a U.S. senator from Georgia, that this park was supposed to be for the enjoyment of the white women, the white girls, the white boys, the white children of the city of Macon. We know who this is for and who this is not for. The pool that they had in the park was cemented in so that there would never be black people swimming in that swimming pool.
We're going to pull back from the schools, transportation, parks, if they become integrated.
There had been black organizing against segregation throughout the entire Jim Crow period. But in the 1960s and 1970s, protests intensified. In the early 1960s, those efforts met some success.
During the Civil Rights era, Macon didn't burn. And here's the secret. This town has always had a small group of progressive people in the black and the white community that somehow came together.
They integrated a lot of things quietly and easily. The golf course, the libraries, done under the Ed Wilson administration.
When they called for the bus boycott, that was very successful. And after that, the Wilson administration decided that there was an inevitability about what was going on.
We will never stop in Macon until Macon is the best place to live in Georgia.
Fremont Temple was one of the centers of the bus boycott in 1962. And here is E.B. Pascal and the other ministers being organized between those two churches, Tremont Temple, Stewart Chapel, and then even in Pleasant Hill, Allen Chapel Haven Church. Right. And all of them were organizing the bus boycott of 1962.
William Randall was, she said, was the Martin Luther King in Macon. He was in charge of the civil rights movement.
Bill Randall and of course people like Papa Joe Hendricks, those people were working quietly to change situations here. And they were very, very effective in the integration of our school system, our bus system, because they worked together.
We set up we called it the dialogue group. And it was 5 white couples and 5 black couples. The first meeting the Hutchings had at their house, it was in Stratford, which was an African-American subdivision off the Shirling Highway.
A decade after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled school segregation unconstitutional, Macon School Board approved a gradual plan to desegregate in 1964, starting with just 16 black high school seniors.
We actually left the schools that we had planned to graduate from and our friends. It was frightening in a sense because you were being taken out of a safe environment. We were, quote, supposedly the kids that could survive in an environment. We had been told that we were 3 years behind. I can remember I never went to a football game. I never went to a prom or any of those kinds of things. Dean Hendricks and the group that pulled us together to go to integrate the schools here, they also pulled us together to go to Mercer. And so Mercer did a lot for me. There were not really any friendships, and I have to be honest, I can't recall any. It just helped me as an individual. I may not have understood that during that period of time. We had a successful integration because you had the university. Mercer University was very active. You had the ministers in this community. There were at least 5 ministers that were very active in working together with Mercer. We also had a mayor at the time. They got together, they convened us.
But a change in city leadership halted desegregation efforts and resulted in the loss of Macon's grandest park.
Ed Wilson and his city attorney, Buck Melton, if they had still been in office when Beaconsfield came up, there might have been a whole different thing of that. They weren't.
There were 2 asphalt basketball courts that were built. There was a volleyball court on a lower level. And then on a lower level than that, going toward the river below the playground, was a football field. Just above that was the women's clubhouse. The city built a zoo there. Now that was very popular with young children. The zoo had a peacock, it had monkeys, it had a bear, there were deer. At one time there was an elk. It was a beauty spot in Macon. The people of Macon were proud of it. I interviewed some African American people who had been in the NAACP, who had been active in the civil rights movement and in the lawsuits on behalf of the African American residents of Macon. They said that they would frequently go down there after the sun went down in the evening and enjoy it. B.F. Merritt was re-elected mayor. He and the city council together decided to resign as trustee of Beaconsfield. Private trustees would keep it segregated. They would operate the park and keep it segregated. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund in New York, in Atlanta, and they intervened on behalf of the Black people of Macon, saying that their rights under the 14th Amendment were being violated. Long story short, it went to the Supreme Court of the United States twice. Once as Evans versus Newton, once as Evans versus Abney. It reverted to the heirs at that point. And that was when there was a great protest movement in Macon that rose up. It was not successful, but it was a mighty effort. There were some local investors that were in private negotiations with the heirs early on. As soon as this second Supreme Court ruling was coming down, they were already talking. And those private investors had plans. The first thing that was built was McDonald's.
Despite the early civil rights successes in Macon and national civil rights legislation, in 1968, most of the city and the schools remained as segregated as ever.
Spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, lived in Buffalo for a while, got married, served in Vietnam. When I returned to Macon in February of that 68, I was, a friend of mine and I was playing basketball. And it was raining, so it ended the game and we was tied. So I suggested to him that we go and play basketball at the YMCA. He said he didn't think the YMCA would allow colored people, that's what they called us at the time, to play there. So I told him they had to let me play because I had a membership card. He said, I still don't think so. We went to the YMCA, and the guy said, you cannot use this YMCA because this YMCA is for white people only. The 64 Civil Rights Bill had been passed. The 65 Voting Rights Act had been passed. And I just assumed everything was okay. I was wrong. Legislation didn't mean nothing. It meant nothing. Later on that year, we finally decided that we needed to go to the YMCA and not leave until we could go in. And we did that, and they locked us up.
He's off fighting for his country, but he can't go to the YMCA in his hometown. So that was sort of the genesis of the Black Liberation Front. They came to our dialogue group, and we talked to them.
So Macon was always slow to change. We didn't fully integrate our schools until 1970.
The Fifth Circuit opinion came down. Over Christmas break, they said, you will merge the schools February 1st.
William Augustus Boodle, federal judge appointed by Republican President Eisenhower. He ruled that it was time for public schools in Bibb County to proceed with desegregation. There were some protests outside his home. There were large gatherings in one of the stadiums in Macon, and speeches were given in defense of segregation and denouncing the Supreme Court for its ruling. There were white demonstrations after Boodle's desegregation order. They have a mock casket and placards that read, "Segregation will be the death of education in Georgia." So there were a good many students and parents who simply did not want their kids to go to school with black kids, and began footing the bill to send them to private schools.
A lot of people pulled out for the next year. You had already seen Stratford set up, and First Presbyterian was in process. Several other segregation academies were started at that time. So in the fall, people had alternatives. But still, you had probably a good 30 or 40% of the white community stayed for the first 15 years, maybe 20 years.
Right now, we integrated the public schools for whites, even white people with very little money. I don't mean poor. They manage most of the time to put their kids in a private school.
In the late 60s and early 70s, activists continued to push Macon businesses to desegregate, even as resistance to civil rights grew louder.
It was a very difficult time through Macon. It was the time when Ronnie Thompson was making a lot of erratic comments. The Black Liberation Front got organized and started picketing the downtown stores.
None of the stores downtown at the time didn't have any black people working there. The ones that was working there, they was either maids, janitors, nobody as a sales clerk.
We integrated all the stores downtown, everything downtown. And we would ask you not to go into the stores and buy anything. And we had some people would, want to go in, but we had to put a little strong hammer tack on them. So we wouldn't let them go in the store. If you owed a bill, you could go in the store. But if you did not owe a bill, you couldn't go in the store.
I was in school at Mercer, and I was working at W.T. Grant, and so I would have to ride the bus down here, and they were actually boycotting all the stores. They were not going to let me go through. And I remember a gentleman said, "It's okay, she's all right, just let her go in, she's a student at Mercer." And so they let me go in to Grant's.
When those demonstrations occurred where blacks were protesting the assassination of King or mourning the assassination of King, Ronnie Thompson made reference to using machine guns to break up the demonstrations, and came to be known as Machine Gun Ronnie Thompson, and even put that on a campaign button when he ran for re-election.
I would go out to, pick up the paper in the morning and see what God's name he had done now. I mean, he just did terrible things. He put up billboards, shoot to kill. The way he wanted to keep peace was to enlist 1,000 white men to patrol the neighborhoods at night. And this was such a horrible idea and so shocking.
He almost caused a race riot right here. Bill Randall single-handedly prevented that from happening.
We had marchers that came through Macon, and Ronnie was worried about when the marchers came through.
Governor Matters, and he had put out to kill us all that was walking. And we was all walking, and when we got to Westland College, we stopped and started singing religious gospel songs. They mixed in with us, and also the Catholic sisters, they always would march with us. Now, they stayed with us at all the time. And during the time, the parents called and went to, singing, "Don't shoot," because they cheering was like that. So that gave the black and the white really to mix in together. Western College stood along with us.
We changed the job market by marching, but what really changed it was the two attorneys that filed class action lawsuits and won. We had the sheriff department, didn't have any blacks, same thing with the city and the county, Board of Education. Marching brought attention to it, but the lawsuit brought results.
By the end of the 1970s, activists had desegregated the parks, the schools, the city council, and local businesses, but stiff resistance to civil rights had undercut the very public institutions Black Maconites had fought to gain access to.
The park starts to disappear. Then there was Kroger, huge parking lot, office park, office buildings. It's the saddest thing in the world. It makes me cry. Very sad that we would have not saved that park. So in Macon, we were adversely affected with our public schools and Beaconsfield Park because of resistance to desegregation. Something important was lost.
Later on, Elaine Lucas got involved with us, and we changed things, and then we got some people elected to different positions, and the people that was elected at the time, most of them was involved, and they was trying to vote for things that would make things better for everybody. People started to change, and they started hiring people. Still, there was discrimination, but the basics they hired.
Wesleyan of today is, as we were saying, it's 55% students of color, right? So we've gone from an institution rooted in white supremacy to an institution that has a completely different, outlook, right? And that it demonstrates progress, that there is progress, and it's tangible and it's real.
I always wonder how whites feel about this. Every discussion we have is how did this affect you as a Black person? Well, how does all this affect whites? And nobody really gets to that. And until we can find a way to figure out how did that person feel when this Black girl intruded into their world, or this Black person intruded into their professional world. If they're asking a question, I haven't heard it. But I think if we're going to solve the problems that we have in this country and in this world, we're going to have to look at all sides of it. I think we've got to learn to talk to one another and listen to one another. We talk at each other, it's and very few people are willing to listen and not be judgmental of you because you don't think the way they think.